how many different phases of life do we all go through? And we think we're alone until we start talking to other women, and then we realize, okay, we're not alone at all. We're really in this together.
Kim Fay is a best-selling author and a lifelong storyteller. She published her first novel at 45 and found her biggest success during the pandemic when she started a book, not for a publisher, but as a gift for two friends. That book, Love and Saffron, it touched thousands. Kim's journey is proof that it's never too late to tell your story, and that sometimes the stories we hear from others are what help us find our way back to ourselves. So if you've ever felt like you've missed your moment or like no one understands what you're going through, this one's for you. Hi, Kim. I'm so happy to have you here today.
Hi, Holly. I'm glad to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Your journey feels like a story in itself. You worked at a really legendary bookstore.
Yeah.
You've written bestsellers on friendship and connections, and you've lived abroad. You've taught, and I know that volunteering is a big part of your life.
Yes,
Out of
it is.
all the things that you've done, where do you think your story really starts?
Oh, I mean, I think it has to do with me being a writer. I think that has been the through line from my whole life. I started writing when I was 10. And I started, when I say I started writing, I started seriously writing when I was 10. I always come with props. And I mean, I was writing books.
Oh, wow.
When I was young, these are, I started like quote unquote printing my books when I was about 12 years old. And I haven't stopped. And it was almost always novels. I tried short stories along the way and I did other things, but I mean, I've been a novelist. Those are short, but they're novels. And I think that probably it starts with just love of story.
Okay.
Because even those novels, my love of story goes back to my grandpa who lived with us a lot of the time, sitting on the side of the bed I shared with my sister and telling us stories every night. And I just feel like that is, if you want to say where did it all begin, that would be the place. And not to go on and on, but that feeds into other things, the travels, the volunteering, because those things are also all about meeting people and their stories.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Why do you think it's so important, and especially as women, to share our stories?
Well, I mean, the two things that come to mind for me are connection. When we tell, I guess these are intertwined because when we tell our stories to one another, we connect, but often we connect through what we share. And we don't know that we share those things until we tell each other our stories. How many different phases of life do we all go through? And we think we're alone until we start talking to other women, and then we realize, okay, we're not alone at all. We're really in this together.
Well, I think that's what I have your books right here. I love. And
Thank you.
I just have to say, when I started reading the first one,
Okay.
Love and Saffron,
And Saffron.
what you're saying now about how women feel disconnected from each other until they start talking to each other. And in your books, they're doing it through letters.
Yes.
What made you decide to write the books through that medium?
I'd never written anything in that way before. My first novel was very much a traditional narrative, and my nonfiction was obviously nonfiction. And there are a lot of inspirations behind the first book, Love and Saffron, but one of them was my friend Janet Brown, who I started corresponding with her. She worked at the LA Book Company when I did. And in 1995, when we both left, She moved to Thailand to teach English, and I moved to Vietnam to teach English. And, here are these two women in the same kind of boat. And we corresponded during that time. But as our lives moved on and as we went in different directions and moved to other places, the correspondence continued. And one of the things that was in my mind when I wrote Love and Saffron was really a tribute to that relationship because after the bookstore, Janet and I really didn't live in what we not really, we didn't live in the same place ever again. She moved
Okay.
back to Seattle. I moved to LA. She was continuing to live back and forth between Asia and Seattle. So our correspondence was the bulk of our relationship. And yet I feel that we have a relationship as close and intimate as any that I have with friends I'm in physical proximity with. And I loved how our friendship unfolded and grew through letters. And just I love the idea of capturing that in a novel.
Do you still write letters to each other?
We don't write physical letters or snail mail in the way that we used to, and that the main thing standing in the way of that is my hands. I can't write. I've Believe it or not, working as a bookseller does a lot of damage to your hands moving books back and forth on shelves. But also, I hand wrote so much when I was younger that my hand really, I can't physically sustain writing long letters.
Okay.
So she and I send mostly email, although we do try to still get letters to each other in the mail. But we've been consistent. And our emails didn't turn into these short little snippets. We still write really long letters to one another through email
I love it.
to
Have
this
you
day.
saved those letters? Because I think there's really something special about being able to look back through all of that.
I have a file in my email, and I've actually recently been researching how do I download emails into a file because I've saved everything from I actually just sent her an email that we think might have been the first email because we comment on it feeling weird and how it doesn't feel as satisfying as writing a letter. And so, but I would like to because I have all of her letters, I'd like to get both of those and kind of see the whole trajectory, how
That
it
would be
develops.
kind of a cool thing. But
Yeah.
you're right about how that must have felt different. Well, for all of us, we were so used to
Yeah.
everything being on paper, and then, um,
And
it,
slower,
yeah,
you know, that,
so much changes in the time from the letter being sent to it
yep.
till it's received.
Yeah. Think about how fast things move now and there's no time to process things. Somebody sends you an email, you're like, I've got to get back. I've got to reply right now. Or you get information and then more information comes and more information comes and more information comes. Or I would get a letter and I'd read it a couple times. I'd sit with a cup of tea. I would maybe a week later respond to the letter. It was just such a different pace.
Yes. Um, could we talk a little bit about both of you deciding to move to different parts of the world? How
Yeah.
did that come about?
To be honest, I'm not exactly sure with Janet. For me, I was in my 20s. I was still very much the characters in the novel Kate and Frida. And I had actually done a little bit of traveling, and in that, way of a 20 something year old, I decided that all, all Americans don't know anything. I need to live outside the country. I need in order for me to write, in order for me to, I don't know what, I was just like, I've got to live outside the country and learn more and see more of the world. And so obviously teaching English is one of the easiest ways to get a job in another country. I went to Seattle University and I got certified to teach English as a foreign language. And one of the first jobs I was offered, because you would write to people who'd graduated from the program and you'd write to them all over the world. And back then, South Korea and Prague and Indonesia were they were kind of the teaching English hotspots at the time. But it was 1995 in Vietnam. it hadn't normalized relations with America, but it was opening up. And a girl who'd graduated from the program had gone to teach there. And when I wrote to her, she said, "This is the most interesting place in the world, and it's going to change, and it's going to change fast. Here's a business card of three American guys. They just opened a language school. Write to them." And I did, and they hired me. And I went I I went over, discovered that I'm not a good teacher at all. I lasted 6 months as a teacher. And I was teaching conversational English to adults, so it wasn't even complicated. These were
Okay.
really, really smart people who had a very good grasp of English. And but I discovered teaching's not my forte. But I loved the country and I ended up staying there for 4 years.
That seems like it takes a little bit of courage. Were you always that type of person? But I'd also see that in your characters. They're all very courageous.
I don't know that I'd call it courageous. I don't know that I thought there was anything unusual about it. And maybe this goes back to my grandfather because he was in the Navy in the 1930s and he was stationed in Asia. So he was a 18, 19-year-old farm boy from Central Washington. And he was in Japan, China, the Philippines, and he absolutely loved it. And those were the stories that he told us. So, kind of this thought of moving to Asia, it didn't seem unusual to me. My grandpa did it, and he
Okay.
did it back in the day. And I love to travel. I'd been to Thailand already by that time. I'd been to Borneo and, I mean, I think it was more, I was a kid who lived in books and I didn't really, there was a disconnect between reality and books for me. I don't know that I necessarily thought about danger. So in that case, I wasn't necessarily brave, probably more stupid sometimes.
Okay.
Because, I mean, I went to Borneo with a friend looking for old prisoner of war camps because I'd seen the movie Three Came Home with Claudette Colbert. So looking back, I probably could have used a little better judgment sometimes, but I'm glad I didn't.
Well, that's what I was just going to say. Sometimes good judgment doesn't always make for the best stories.
Yes. But I'm thankful that, I'm safe. I was safe. So the one thing I'll say is I always met really great people and my experiences were so positive. I feel very, very fortunate in that respect.
What do you think
Yeah.
are the qualities that help us make friendships last? And it sounds like you're pretty good at it because how long has that friendship lasted with
Well,
you
my
and
friendship with Janet's been more than 30 years. And then my friendship with Stella, who's also in the book, the Stella character has been more than 30 years. And obviously my best friendship with my sister, well, since she was born. I think I have really positive examples of women in my life. And, I have a mom who always had really wonderful friends and there was never any drama.
Mm.
I don't ever remember my mom being in a fight with a friend or having that weird neighborhood gossip that you see on really juicy TV shows or anything like that. So my sister and I had incredibly positive role models for women. And we also were really close to our aunts, our great aunts, our grandmas. But I would say, acceptance because we're all human. And the second we start judging our friends, then that friendship's in trouble. And so I think one of the things that comes out in both of the novels is that even when one woman might think, well, the other woman shouldn't really be doing that, she's not judging her. She's trying to understand her and trying to support her and help her through the situation. And those are I think the most important, important ways that you can keep a friendship.
it's important to you know connect with your friends but also give the
Yeah.
friendship some room to understand each other and
Yeah.
grow, and especially
Yeah.
from your early 20s to our
Yeah.
midlife, things change, we change.
A lot changes. A lot changes. And I think it's also, you know, things are going to go up and things are going to go down. And sometimes you might be apart, not even because something's wrong, but time, distance, and then you come back together. I mean, one of my best friends, I met in Vietnam. And when her name is Hung. And when we lived in Vietnam, we were like this,
Mhm.
obviously proximity. Then I left Vietnam. I traveled back a bit, but then she married a man from Macedonia. Then he got a fellowship in Sweden. But I would still say we're like this. We're
Mhm.
still sisters. We've just had to, you know, um, maintain the friendship in a different way. And sometimes, back in the day, we could go a year without talking because you know, you didn't make phone calls overseas in the way that you can now. But now I can hop on Zoom every Sunday and read her daughter a bedtime story. And
Oh,
then she and I can have a chat and catch up. And, you know, uh, it's also how creative are you in how you work at your friendships? Because I don't consider it work in like a drudgery sense, but every relationship requires, your constant nurturing. And so that would be another thing I would say too, is we really have to work at nurturing our friendships with one another.
a lot of things do change, and we
Yeah.
move, and other people come into our lives. I have a really good friend that I've known
Yeah.
since we were born next to each other, and
Oh,
we could
wow.
go, yes, we could
Yes.
go, I mean, months, yeah, probably years without speaking to another,
Yeah,
not for any particular reason, but life.
exactly.
But then when we do have that opportunity, it's like there's no time passed.
And those are the like I have acquaintance friendships that I really value, that I may see somebody regularly because of proximity, but then when it comes to the friendships you're talking about,
Hmm.
those are the people who so there's something in your heart that is connected with them. And I feel like when that connection's made, it never breaks.
Yeah.
It just doesn't, because we're all busy people. Life moves around and on and forward and backward. But for those heart connections, it's not the amount of time spent together. It's quality, not quantity.
Very true. Okay, okay.
Yeah.
I have to ask, you wrote Love and Saffron
Hmm.
when the world was like upside down. So during
Yeah.
the pandemic.
Yeah.
And I read somewhere that you said something about the pandemic unlocked something new in your voice.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I I've thought about this a lot because I've been asked this question, and often you don't think about these things until you're interviewed and somebody asks you a
Hmm.
question. And I think I wanted so badly to be a writer for so long that I was trying hard to be a writer, but I didn't know what I wanted to write. And I didn't know what my voice was, and I didn't know who I was as a writer. When my first novel was published, it was such a like a mosaic of everything. I thought I wanted to be a literary writer. I wanted to write like Michael Antanje. I wanted to write an adventure novel. I wanted to do this. All of that's in there. And it was my big experiment because it was me going, who am I? What do I want to write? And I didn't know. I really didn't know. And I mean, it was published in 2012, and Love and Saffron was published in 2022, which shows you even after I wrote it, I didn't know what I wanted to do, or I didn't know how to do it. And, this is that whole thing. It doesn't, you're not always searching when you're 22 because um, Map of Lost Memories came out when I was in my mid 40s. So I was still looking for my voice in my mid 40s. And I was still looking for my voice when I went into my 50s. And I think the, because I started writing, I'd had these sketches, like I'd had some ideas for this book, but the pandemic started and I just started writing this novel, Love and Saffron, and I think because of the nature of the pandemic and what it kind of did to all of our heads, put us in
Yeah.
this headspace we'd never been in before. I think it kind of, without me realizing it, distilled me as a writer. And what came out was what had probably been sitting underneath, and maybe, kind of a fear. When you really put your heart on a page, that's scary because if people judge it,
Yes,
it's your heart.
yes.
As opposed to that first novel was a lot of things, but it wasn't my heart. People could say whatever they wanted about it, and that it wasn't pain. It wouldn't hurt in the same way.
Right.
But I also find that when you put your heart on the page, people respond to it. And that certainly happened with Love and Saffron and with Kate and Frida. People have responded in such personal ways that did not happen with the first novel.
Well, it's interesting because I don't know you all that well, but I know about you. But in
Yeah.
reading the books, I feel like I do know you. Like I see you in these characters.
I was gonna say Kate and Frida, you really know me because I'm Kate. I mean that I would say it's 95% that character is about 95% autobiographical. So the thing, I mean, I took passages straight from my diaries from my 20s for the novel. It was a very autobiographical, and I think also because everything that's in the novels, even if it's not my personal story, it's things in my life that I have spent time exploring. Whether it's friendship, whether grief, family. It's all the books have been ways for me to put my thoughts about those things on the page.
Those are all big things, though.
They're very big things.
Hmm. You talked about still having a hard time finding your voice when you were 40, and then when you wrote, when you were 50.
Yeah.
Is there anything that you could say to, because there are other women that feel those same
Yeah.
things, and finding their voice might necessarily mean that they want to write a book, but that they're not being heard.
It's so hard to offer advice on that because I think we all come to it in our own way.
Mhm.
You know, it's I that internal censor is so strong no matter how what your background is, no matter how far you've come. I mean, I think I probably think I was also able to come into my voice because I'd done so much work on myself. And by that I mean, just reading people like Pima Chodron
Mhm.
or reading, it always comes back to reading for me, but, reading more women who found their voices. And I mean, I struggle. I don't know how you, what your, what your, you know, how you would give that advice because it's always easy to give advice to somebody,
Mhm.
but we're not in their shoes.
Yes.
So it's then on their side, them looking at what works for them and what doesn't. Um, but I mean, it's hard because a lot of women don't feel that they have a voice simply because of our society and because of our systems. And that was never the case for me. I was definitely raised to have a voice, in that respect. And especially the men in my life, my dad, my grandpa. I mean, you want to talk about two of the most supportive human beings in the world. I never once felt silenced or that you can't do something or that you can't say something. But for me, I think it was more, I loved writing, but didn't know what I wanted to say.
Mhm.
So, women feel voiceless for so many reasons. And I'm struggling with an answer on this one. Yeah.
That's okay. But
Yeah.
I know exactly what you mean. It's hard to give that kind of advice just because the
Yeah.
situations are all so different.
Yeah.
And
You have to be in the moment with the person, I think, a
yes.
lot of the time. But then at the same time, I do think about, I've read books where I know that book has spoken to tens of thousands, if not millions of people. So there's universal advice out there. I just don't know that I'm the one to give it.
Do you have a book that's spoken to you?
Actually, during the pandemic, hang on, I'm going to reach into my bookshelf here, which is right beside me. Um, that was when I discovered Pema Chodron, the Buddhist nun.
Okay.
And this book had, When Things Fall Apart, had been recommended to me by numerous people. And even though, it's When Things Fall Apart, Heart Advice for Difficult Times, I would say this is a book for anyone. Um, but it's just such a I think one of the biggest reminders is that most of what we experience, we're not alone. We're not the only people to have experienced it, and to open our hearts up to that bigger experience that we're all going through helps us connect to one another better. And when we connect to one another better, we connect to ourselves better. But I read that book through a couple difficult times during the pandemic, and you know, you know how it is when you read a book and it speaks to you
Yes.
perfectly right at that moment, and it did. I've read 4 of her books, and she's something. She and I connect. Let's
Yes.
just say.
Yeah. And it's such a special feeling, I think, when you pick that book up and you realize, oh,
Yeah.
it's what you needed in that moment.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm really curious though about food because you weave that through your stories. Are you
This
a
is
cook? Do you like to
I
cook?
like to cook, and I am a cook, but I'm not a foodie in the way that my books would suggest. I'm a good cook, you
Hmm.
know. I wouldn't call myself intuitive the way certain people are. I enjoy food, but I wouldn't say that I'm like one of those people who goes to a restaurant and picks apart all this ingredient and that technique. But I love reading about food, and I love writing about food. So it's I I I always feel like I should love food more because of what's in my book. I mean, I do love food, but there should be I should be up on a different level when it comes to food and cooking. Um, I still love a good box of macaroni and cheese
Who
as
doesn't? I
well.
have one in my pantry right now
You
because I was in
always
the
have to have
grocery
one in your
store and I
pantry.
thought,
It's very important.
yes, I'm like, this might come in handy in the next couple of days. I don't know
Yeah,
why. Just getting a feeling it might be a
yeah,
Kraft macaroni and cheese night.
exactly. Exactly.
Okay. But all right, let me just read then one line since we're talking about
Okay.
food.
All right.
And I think it's just the way you bring people together around it.
Mm,
And this
yeah.
line was no matter how bad food is, we taste it with generosity if it's made for us by a friend with a tender heart. And I
Yeah.
thought, oh, that's so true.
Yeah.
What made you, is there an inspiration behind that?
There
Someone
is, and
cook
I
for
didn't
you?
realize it until you just said this. I didn't put two and two together until you just said this. I mean, I do believe it's true, and I think of a lot of times when we've made meals for one another that were just okay, but a friend made it for you. But my friend Hung, who I was talking about in Vietnam, she's much younger than me. And when we were living there, I was in my late 20s. I think she was in her late teens. And then, we grew older, obviously. And one night, she really wanted to make dinner for me. She was super, super excited. She was going to make her specialty for me. And most of the women I knew in Vietnam were exceptional cooks, just exceptional cooks. And so she was really excited. She gets over to the house and she makes instant ramen and canned corn, which she chopped chili and put in the canned corn. And so
Okay.
that was her meal. That was this amazing, her dish that she made. I was so moved by that. I was so touched that this was her special dish and she was sharing it with me. And it cracked me up because I mean, my cooking levels at that time were much much more above hers. But it was, it is one of my most precious memories, that moment in the kitchen, watching her and realizing what she was doing. And the crazy thing is, she's probably one of the best chefs I know now. When she
Mm.
cooks, her food is phenomenal. And she does have that instinct. She does have that, gut instinct in the kitchen.
Was that just a comfort meal for her, do you think? Or is just
I think it was
something?
all she knew how to make.
Okay. All
I think
right.
it was all, her mom, her mom cooked, but I don't think it had come. I thought she was, I think at the time she truly believed she was making a gourmet meal for me. And it
Well,
was,
you still think about it to this day, so
I do,
clearly.
I can still see the room. I can still see us there in our little black tank tops, and I was thinking we were all that.
Right. Well, you were.
We
You were all
were,
that.
we were a team.
In the books, you've gone back in history to write about these
Mhm.
characters.
Yeah.
Um, was there a reason for that? Do you like writing in the past to
I
tell a
do. I
story?
mean, I do love historical fiction. The reason Love and Saffron set in the 60s is because I'd always, the Joan character, who is the food writer for the
Mhm.
newspaper, is based on Barbara Hansen, who was a very good friend of mine. And Barbara was, she started writing for newspapers in LA in the early 1960s, and she started writing about cuisines from different countries, which nobody else was doing.
Mm.
And so I met Barbara in 2010 when I had written a book about Vietnamese food, and she came to the reading, and we became friends. And at that time, we both lived on opposite sides of the old historic farmers market, so we would meet at the farmers market like once a month and hang out and have coffee and talk. And the more I talked to her, the more I thought, why, first of all, why does nobody know about this woman? And second of all, why has nobody written about her?
Mm.
And so when this loose concept for Love and Saffron popped into my head, along with wanting to honor the idea of correspondence and what it can accomplish and how it can work in a friendship, I'd also had this idea I wanted to write about Barbara. So and I wanted to write about Barbara at that time when what she was doing was innovative, when she was starting out. So
Okay.
that was how that time period came about. And of course, who doesn't, love the 60s? There's so much to explore there. But the main reason for that particular time period choice was Barbara's life.
It's so interesting now to think about you talk about different ingredients and about how much trouble people have to go through to find some
Mhm.
of these things. But
Yeah.
now it just I don't know, it changes it a little bit because you could go down the street and buy saffron and it's not going to be a big deal.
Yeah, you can buy it anywhere now. You can buy it
Yeah.
at any regular grocery store. You can get almost any, well, especially in LA, but yeah, you can get almost any ingredient, and you don't have to go out of your way at all. I actually have a big book from the early 70s. It's this, I found it at some sale, and it's a catalog of just ingredients and where you can mail order them from around the United States. Because, when Barbara first started writing, cilantro was only in Chinatown and you couldn't get it anywhere else. And nobody, the average person didn't know what it was. And it was called Chinese parsley. And she remembers finding it and, learning to cook with it. And now, when you think about cilantro and you're just like, well, that's any old, that's common. That's every day.
Right? It's like parsley or oregano. It's
Yeah.
just there.
The only fresh herb I think I grew up with was parsley.
I
I
think
don't think
so
anybody
too.
ate
And
it.
that
It
was
just went on
usually
the
as a
side of a
garnish.
plate. Yeah, it was yeah. People didn't eat it. It just sat on the side of your plate and then it went in the garbage.
Right? Yes. I can't imagine my
Dirt.
mom cooking with anything um that
Everything else
yeah.
was dried. All the other herbs were dried.
Yes. And I
Yeah.
think we really stuck with I'm Polish, so our my mom's cooking
Mhm.
was not very it was delicious, but it wasn't very inventive. She didn't try different things.
that's a good way of putting it because we had, I mean, our it was good food, but it was, the basics. It was
Hmm.
pot roast, it was spaghetti, it was meatloaf, it was,
Chicken
not,
soup.
yeah, not inventive.
No.
That's an interesting way of putting it. Yeah.
But when you're feeding a family of six, I think it gets
Yeah.
old after a while. And
Yeah.
she just made sure there was food on the table, but you
Yeah.
certainly weren't going to be wowed by it. Could we talk a little bit? The other thing that I'm curious about is
Mhm.
your volunteer work. 'Cause
Okay.
you do a
Okay.
lot of that, and it seems to be a big part of your life.
It is. It is. And my volunteer work's been very focused
Mm-hmm.
on one place. I started volunteering at Alexandria House here in Los Angeles in 2001. And Alexandria House is a transitional residence for women who are moving between being unhoused and taking that journey into housing and getting back into that place. And it's a very unusual place. It's two beautiful homes in the Mid Wilshire district. There is a big Craftsman and a big Victorian. So they're very big. They're like homes. So it's not an institutional setting at all. And women have, women have stayed there a few months. I think some have stayed for well more than a year as they get back on their feet because a lot of them have children. And I actually came to Alexandria House oddly through the National Council of Jewish Women, who was sponsoring their after school program. So I came in through their after school program
Okay.
and I started volunteering and I ended up taking over as the partner heading up the after school program. And the thing that I liked most about it, it was for kids in the neighborhood. So it was for kids in the house, but it was also for kids in the neighborhood, which was mostly an immigrant neighborhood, families from El Salvador, Mexico, Guatemala at the time. And the cool thing about it, which I loved, is that it was a blanket program. So, if you've got a kid coming in kindergarten, then they came back for first grade, then they came back for second grade, then they came back for third grade. So if you stay, you're knowing the kids. You're with them every year. So by the time my first crew got into fifth grade and we're going to move into the teen program, I kind of freaked out because I have known you guys for so long. So I started a writing program. And that was really probably one of the most significant periods of my time or of my life because that program, it lasted for about 5 years, but it walked all of those kids I'd started in kindergarten with all the way through high school graduation.
Oh,
So I was actually privileged to be a part of their lives from kindergarten through graduation. And I actually this summer just attended the graduation for one of my girls, Grace, her master's. She's got her
oh,
master's
that's
in social work.
wonderful.
And so the really interesting thing is so many of the kids have gone on to college, to different jobs, but so many of them have jobs that give back to their communities
Mm.
or give back in some way. It's really a special group. And I've maintained friendships with about like I'm I'm still in touch with a lot of them. That's a great thing about social media, but close friendships with about five of the kids. And then the program naturally faded out, the writing program, because for various reasons. And then during the pandemic, I started a writing program for the past residents of the women of Alexandria House. And so it was attached. Alexandria is really cool because it has a past residence program. So people who have lived there, they all stay connected, which you don't
That's
really find in a
wonderful.
situation like that. The women themselves started a book club that has been going for more than 10 years. And we kind of attached the writing program to the book club.
Okay.
So they go hand in hand. And we're on a little bit of a hiatus now. One of our women passed away, who is a very significant part of the program.
Mm.
So we're kind of regrouping and figuring out how we want to get it back.
Oh, I'm sorry to
But I
hear that. But
thank you, thank you. It was the memorial was a few days ago, and it's been hard on all of us because she was she was a lot of glue, Ms. Shirley,
right?
holding our group together. But I think because of the way Alexandria House is structured, whereas people just aren't in and out. It's
Mm.
there is a real sense of family and continuity, and that has made it um, maybe far more significant in my life than a more typical volunteer experience would
Well,
have been.
it sounds like that brings sort of your story sort of full circle from those
Hmm.
journals that you held up in the beginning up
Exactly.
until now. Like writing has always been a big part of your life.
Always. Always. I love sharing it. I love reading other people's writing. I love encouraging other people to write. I love reading the back of boxes in the grocery store, And I don't know why. I can't explain why it's but it's my thing and it's always been a part of me.
Well, I'm glad it's a part of you because I
Thank
love what
you.
you're doing, and I can't
Excuse me.
wait to get to for you to get to the number 3 in this.
I'm
No
working. I'm
pressure.
struggling. I'm working and struggling. This one's not coming as easily, not because it's not my heart. It's just structurally harder.
Yes. Well, before we leave today,
Okay.
what are you working on? What are you passionate about? And like, where should we look for more of Kim?
Kind of hunkering down right now because I'm working on this new book. I mean, I do work full time, so um, that I write around that.
Hmm.
I don't know. I think I'm still trying to get out there on social media and also do book clubs and events, but it's I think with any writer, you have your time, the book comes out and you are out there. And then you've got to kind of retreat, go back into your little cave and continue writing. So that's where I'll probably be for if somebody wants to crawl into the cave, they will find me in the cave. That's where I'll be probably for this next year.
I'll be sure to keep my eye out for you.
Oh,
And
we're definitely going to stay in touch. This has
yes,
been really
and
lovely.
just thank you so much
Oh,
for
Holly,
being here
thank you.
today and just telling your story and being an inspiration for other women to tell
Oh,
theirs.
I appreciate that because I so value all the women who inspire me. So, I mean, it's a group effort. It takes a village.
Definitely, definitely.
Yeah. All right.
Well,
Thank you, Holly.
you're welcome. And again, thank you. Thank you for joining us on Real Wisdom. If you're inspired by stories like this and want to be part of a community that celebrates the wisdom of women, visit joinempart.com and become a part of our conversation. And don't forget to subscribe for even more real wisdom. Until next time, keep embracing your story.